Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world today. Thank you for joining us in the latest episode of the State of Digital Trials podcast. I'm delighted that you are joining us today because we're going to have a very exciting episode for you. It isn't often I'm joined by two people, but today is an exception. And today I'm going to be joined by Vivian and Bree Burks. And then we are going to be talking about the importance, and I want to underline that about 15 times, the importance of sites in clinical trials. Now we are today together in what is actually quite sunny Boston, which is a strange thing to say, but I came here expecting sunshine and I arrived to rain, so I'm delighted that as we finish the summit, and we'll come on to that in a second, it is actually quite sunny today.
True.
But before we go any further, I would love to start with you, Vivian, and say first of all, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you've done over the summit, and again, we'll cover that in a second. But for those of my guests who perhaps don't know you as well as I do, would you mind introducing yourself as Dr. Vivian And would you also mind, if I know you don't always talk about this, would you mind just perhaps introducing yourself with reference to the specific awards from SCRS and your role in the industry?
Yeah.
And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be both here in Boston and here for this podcast. So, my name is Vivian and I'm a physician by training. I studied medicine both in Maastricht, which is in the south of the Netherlands, and in Oxford. I got a PhD in pediatrics. And I started my career in clinical research actually as participating as a healthy volunteer in a drug trial. And I got intrigued by it, and they were looking for a sub-PI, and I said, I'll stay on board for a little while before I go back to the hospital for the rest of my life. But I never went back. I just loved the job so much. It was so versatile. I grew into it. I eventually took over the site, and I love sharing my experiences. And because of that, I became a member of the SCRS, which is a Society of Clinical Research Sites, which is a global organization for sites. And I was awarded last year the Christine Pierre Award for my work I do for the sites in general, and specifically also for the SCRS. I'm on their advisory board for a couple of years, and I'm on the advisory board of SysGroup here in Boston that is doing research on clinical research. Yeah.
So is it safe for me to say you are heavily involved in setting some of the agendas for us as an industry, but us as an industry trying to work closer with sites?
Yeah. I want you to listen to our story and understand, and then collaboratively look at where we're going and what we can do.
I think something I'm going to pick up immediately, because I know you a lot better, I have a feeling the word passion is going to get used about this podcast. So can I move to you to explain, Bree, your role here in Veeva?
Sure.
As VP of Strategy for Site Solutions? If you can explain your role, a little bit about your background, and perhaps you can elaborate on why I'm using that word passion as well.
I'll guess. It's hard to follow, Vivian, but nobody else I'd rather follow. So my background is nursing, and really never thought nursing school would lead me to working at a product company. And I started out in a neuro ICU and had a really cool opportunity to get into research, and thought it was going to be easy and I could sort of moonlight and become a nurse practitioner doing these research studies, walking around with paper, watching people draw blood tubes. I'm like, that looks quite easy. And I got hooked because I was on some of the first positive trials ever for big strokes, and just saw it was life-saving and thought, gosh, I want to do this. I want to be part of the innovation for patients. And worked at the University of Florida doing clinical trials, worked at the University of Colorado doing clinical trials, ran a clinical trials office at Vanderbilt, and never again thought I would work in technology. But so many of the challenges that I was facing, even though I was running that office, really only technology could solve. And there was just a lack of great processes and efficiency, and got this amazing opportunity, sort of right place, right time, kind of situation to come to Veeva. And I feel like I have the best job in the world. I get to talk to sites all day long. I am the VP of strategy here for our site solutions. And not only do I get to talk to sites all day long, I get to connect them, which is what we've seen here, with sponsors and CROs, and really talk about ways to really build a better future for the industry, which is going to take partnership and better lines of communication and not just technology. So, that's the way I spend my time right now, and I'm very passionate about it.
I can tell. I think that's going to come across in budget. You've been having many conversations.
Oh, yes.
Are there one or two of those, or three of those pain points you've just referred to that you would share
Sure.
this time?
Well, I always joke, and this actually happened at a clinic a couple of months ago, there's a multitude of vendors we now have to deal with, and it's like you're getting all these emails in with codes and URLs and activation things, and it's quite a struggle to get everything up and running. And at one point I was joking to my nurse who went home, my coordinator that went home, and I said, oh, just leave me behind here in this really bad escape room. And she left and she said, but that's it, it's literally, we're going through this escape room. And ever since I tell that story, so many people can relate to it, or finally understand from the other side, oh yes, I do now see, because I'm only one of those vendors, or I'm only the sponsor who's hiring the vendors, but now I understand, the challenge. Other challenges is like, we're talking about staffing, which is a universal problem. It's here in the US, it's in Europe, finding suitable, and a lot of people, even medical students or young physicians, don't have a clue that this is also a career they can move into. And I think it's a very fun career to look into. And the third pain point that was discussed on multiple panels, I think, was also the budgeting and the finances and the payments. That is also a universal thing. Some of the feedback I got, because we were giving also the stories that were happening at the site. So, for instance, when a drug is delivered too late at a site, for them the problem is solved as soon as it is actually on the site. But the impact it has that it was delivered too late, and we are making house calls traveling hundreds of kilometers to take it to these patients, and late delivery or late drug administration can lead to side effects. That impact they never realized. And telling those stories and how dedicated, all the sites that we hear, how dedicated we were to do the best for our patients. And about the technology, I think the awareness I try to create, and also what we're doing here at the summit, the technology is a tool, it's not an aim. It is something to support conducting clinical trials. And I often joke, like, the technology shouldn't be the trial itself. It should be supporting the trial.
I want to ask a couple of questions. One is a bit product, so I might ask it to you first, Bree, and then see a comment from you, Vivian, afterwards. But we also announced two things here at Summit, one of which speaks directly to the problem Vivian just said. Can I ask, just a quick answer, but what's been the reaction you've sensed to the Viva ID and the study portal announcements? And then I'll ask Vivian just to comment as well.
I think the reaction has been, this has been the consistent, you see all the surveys from sites, this is the consistent problem they've wanted someone to solve. Help me have a better experience logging into all of these different systems. And seeing how excited the sites were and how they were texting their directors, like, we got to get this, I can't wait. It's been really cool for them to feel heard, like, this is my truly biggest pain point, and you understand that, and you're building a solution to meet my biggest need.
And if it's a pain point, you can take a drug for your pain, so that's not the solution. But with pain point, what we're really saying, you're taking time away from what we want to do, is taking care of our patients. Anything that's taking time away from that is a pain point for a site. And anybody who's stepping in, resolving that, is actually helping patient care. A lot of people don't realize that. And when we address these things, it's not about, as I say, witching and whining. It's trying to draw attention and finding somebody who's willing to take ownership and find a solution for that. And these products definitely, I support them, obviously. That I say, this is making our lives easier. Yeah.
Can I perhaps ask an extension to that? Because I like the way you said that. It's time. But is there also the potential, if technology doesn't work quite the way you want it to and as fast as you want it, does it weaken the patient-caregiver relationship as well? Is it an obstacle to you maintaining that relationship with your patients?
Yeah, but we do explain, but they look at us. So we are the one that they look at when something is malfunctioning or it's taking time during a visit to get things up and running. And, I try to explain, I don't want to hide behind somebody else's back, but we're tied to use this system. We always explain to the first patient that comes in for that trial, when you're the first one, you're literally going to be the trial in a trial, because we have to test, because that's one of the biggest challenges, and we talked a lot about this during during these past days, is that we get training to work with these systems, but we really don't have hands-on experience with it until we have the first patient sitting there and we have to actually start it. That's the first time when we really see how it works and what they're seeing. And that's, I think, a universal thing that all sites were saying. This is the biggest drawback, because I literally picked my first patient based on they've participated previously in a trial, or they're savvy, and literally we always explain to them, this is going to take a bit more time than normal, basically because it's a learning curve for us just as well.
If we could move forward a little bit, what does excellent clinical research start to look like? Are there big things you just want to have someone address? We've maybe hinted at a couple here, but are there other big obstacles that perhaps anyone watching today needs to be thinking about, may not be thinking about? Are there any big things you would put out there? And I'll let both of you debate that.
Okay. So from my perspective, I would say big obstacles are the fact that clinical trials are not embedded in more routine care. That is a huge obstacle of really having to seek out where to go to find clinical trials, and most physicians are not like Vivian. They don't offer clinical trials. And I think that is a real disservice to the healthcare system. For me, the things that we need to be thinking about in order to have a future that way is we have to make these things more simple to do so more physicians can do them and just embed them in the way that they work. We have to stop with all of the different systems and all of the different ways of working. There's way too much variation in the ways that clinical trials are conducted today at the site level. And until we simplify that and we get rid of all that variation, it's just not going to be able to be more accessible to patients. Most people are not as resilient and savvy and determined and passionate as we see Vivian being.
I think the most important thing is being determined, I think. A couple of things here. The systems have to be intuitive. If they tell me it's an intuitive system and then I have to do a 3-hour training, that's not intuitive. It's wasting my time, and it's a system that is going to be challenging. Even within the same service provider, we are doing 3 different trials, and we have an e-diary, we have an iPad, and we have a portal. And in all the 3 trials, there's a different way to activate the e-diary. For the first one, we do it on the e-diary. For the second one, we do it on the iPad, and there. Why isn't there a consistency? Because there was another project team working on that, and they don't realize. So having that consistency, but also, have systems communicate with each other. If you're on your iPhone and you're browsing, to look for, a shoe store, then literally you can call and then also go to your GPS and be, and people think, but it's all the same. I said, no, these are 3 different applications from different factories, different developers, but they communicate. Mm-hmm. Why can't we do that in clinical trials? And then the only solution is for one service provider to provide as much as he can in a single environment. Yeah, I think in clinical research we're working too much in silos, and we as sites are actually bridging those silos.
And I think it's interesting for me because as a data manager, so I'm living a slightly different experience, but I feel like we've been here before. 20 years ago we created this thing called EDC. And 20 years ago I think we threw it at you and said, you're now a data entry team.
And the budget's never changed.
And we didn't give any more time. And that's exactly what we did. And yet here we are 20 years later, and I'm now going, here's 15 new technologies. And by the way, you own them. You're now the help desk. And I'm going to let you work it out for yourself. Am I being fair or am I being unfair when I
No, but I don't want to look at that this in a grim way. I mean, when we went into EDC, I literally for every trial I had a different laptop. So we had stacks like 15 laptops at our site. I was showing early on a little device that we had. So that was the first actually thing we had for electronic, which was a bleeping system when we were moving away from the randomization envelopes to an IVRS system. And the telephone, some landlines didn't make those bleep sounds that you had to do, so we had a little device you put on the phone and make that. I'm a dinosaur, I know. And there were times when the e-diaries had to be connected to the landline at the patient's house, and literally we had to drive down and make all these connections and doing that. Mm-hmm. So we've come, really far from that to what we are right now. So the technology itself might not be that challenging, but it's a multitude and a variety that's making it challenging. And adding one pain point is if something is not working, whether it's a device or even a courier or something, it's always put on my deviation log. So there's no obvious feedback to these vendors or whoever you're working with that there's something not going well. Yep. It's on my deviation log. And then their kappa is we retrain the site. And I joke you can train me as much as you want. But if the vendor isn't changing their software, we are keeping recurring issues coming, to our site. And on the other hand, when they evaluate my site for a future trial, they go oh my God, look at the number of deviations this site had. That must be an issue. Nobody looks back at what the issue really was. So my thing, and it's not about finger pointing, but being transparent, is having a deviation log for all these different things, whether it is a laboratory or whether it's a courier or whether it is a vendor, but be transparent, okay, this is where the issues are. But also, and literally, it was one of the vendors that was reaching out to me. He said, Vivian, stop solving all my problems in my e-diary, because if you're not calling my help desk, I think I'm delivering a good device and a good service. And I said, but your help desk is just not helping me. So I tried to resolve as much, and in the meantime I was savvy enough to resolve 90% of the issues that we were having. But it was my lesson learned, okay, yes, it makes sense that if I don't report it, then he thinks he's doing a good job. So I literally tracked everything and then handed it to this person who was representative of this company. But that's when it clicked my mind, we should have a deviation log or an issue log or whatever you want to call it, just to be transparent, where are the pain points and where can we improve and make it easier.
So maybe I can just extend the question. So we've talked about technology. We've kind of hinted at perhaps people and process, but let me just click in there and perhaps start with you, Vivian. Technology is an enabler. Technology should be able to enable us to do things better. But from a site and a patient perspective, are there just procedural things you would like us to tackle? And how do you think the people at your site react to these new technologies, new processes? And I'm going to turn into a very long question, but is there also a lack of standardization across sponsors that just creates even more work?
Yeah, or some people saying don't ask me to do this. And this is, I think, pretty unique to how I changed it a little while ago at my site, is instead of one coordinator being responsible from A to Z for one trial, I literally sat down and I said, okay, I want to test all the, and I know I'm unique for that because people keep telling me, I want to see all the vendors and all the techniques we're going to work with. And then I know my staff. I said, okay, this person is very good at e-diaries, this person is good at that, and data entry. And I said, okay, you're doing this for this trial, you're doing this for that trial. What happens is that they love their job because they're doing what they're good at and what they like. If I'm forcing them to do all these other technologies, and they're not savvy because some people just don't have that feeling. And I can back them and train them as much as I can, but if they don't, just like drawing blood, some people can really draw blood in a very, good way, and the other ones you go no way you're standing with a needle, even, in the same room with a patient. If you acknowledge that and say, I take the best part of you, and that's what you're going to do for each and every trial. And of course there's a backup, and somebody else can do it. And, I've done the training, so basically I should be able to back up whatever is necessary at the site. But it is for the industry an awkward way of starting up a trial with me because they want to burst out everything to everybody. And I said, I don't, because you're overloading mailboxes with things that some people don't need. and they're being frustrated, and they get these reminders like, I have to do this training. I said, they will never have to do the training. I'm just looking for a fit for purpose with the person. And I've talked to multiple sites, and they do like the model, but it's literally turning around the traditional mindset.
Is that similar parallels in your background in conversation today?
Yes, and so just to add a little bit more, I would say, what we see with all of this technology is kind of, as Vivian saying, it's not the technology itself that's bad, but what it can't do is take the place of the very important communications and relationships that still need to happen. You can't just say, here's all your training. What we're not doing a good job of, I think, in our industry is, what is the site's experience? What is their user experience on all of this stuff? How do we keep those lines of communication open and flowing as they're getting more and more technology handed down to them so that the technology can work for them? And you can't just give them a piece of technology and back away and then give them a help desk to call. So I think that's where we've missed the boat a little bit. And I also think, the currency for sites has really been, give us data for your patient visits. Now we are asking sites to stand up so much additional infrastructure, reach into their communities, not just hover in for trials, but have these community relationships to bring in more rural patients, more diversity into trials, to understand all these different systems. And they really do have to be paid for that additional infrastructure. And I think that we haven't made that pivot as an industry, and it's really hurt our sites a lot. And so I think it's not necessarily at all the technology is bad, it's that we are not supporting the technology properly.
And I'm going to assume here that will immediately knock on to patients as we bring more technology for patients into play as well. Is that just a natural continuation if we allow that to continue?
Absolutely. And then you think about the patient experience. It would be, you hear those words, patient centricity, all the time. How many patients are really at the table and we're truly designing technology around them that works for them? That to me is really not yet happening, and it's certainly not happening consistently. It's certainly not happening industry-wide, because every patient I've ever asked what they want out of technology is they want to be able to find a darn study and who to contact to get into one. And we are not solving that problem for them very well. I can get on my phone right now, I can find any physician in my area or, pretty much anywhere. I understand the procedures that they offer. I understand rating scales on, reviews on them. I just had this personal experience of trying to find a clinical trial for a family member, and it's almost impossible. So I think patients would prioritize things much differently than the way we've prioritized things. And so I still feel like we really need to hold ourselves accountable for patient centricity from a technology standpoint. I just don't think we're there.
You talked about innovation for patients, which I think we've covered a little bit of, and bring it, but I actually want to bring it back to something you said right before we started recording, Vivian. And that was, and you kind of did it in your introduction as well, I'll tell you everything you want to know, but I need you to listen.
Yep.
Is that kind of what we're kind of saying all here? Is there just a lack of listening in your experience?
Yeah, assumption. And I always say there's no room for assumption in clinical trials. Yep. That's, it's science, we need data. And then assuming, and even I'm guilty. I assumed that more people were actually having a laptop or a computer at home and having internet access. And the pandemic learned me that even young families didn't have that. And in the Netherlands, government were stepping in and fundraisers were organized to get these laptops to these families for children to be, continue their education. One of the other hot topics right now is, diversity. So if we're making technology that's complex, we're actually making a selection who can participate based on that because they can't. The other thing is just an example. My significant other, when I met him, was still having a Nokia, and we didn't meet like 3 centuries ago, just a couple of years ago. But he said, it's working. I'm not distracted by all the other things on my phone, and my battery is there for a whole week, while yours have to be charged, twice a day. And we're like, God damn, he's right. My mother is 94, and she lives on her iPad. You know, she literally, last week, she booked like hotels and everything, and she wants to go away on a weekend to France, and one of her kids have to take her there. So we assume that a 94-year-old would not be able to work with the technology, and a 50-year-old would, and that's not, you know, that's again an assumption, and we've seen, you know, it goes everywhere. And I think that's also the responsibility of the site to make sure that anybody that steps in my clinic wants to participate, that we can facilitate no matter what technology is being used. But we need to help when it's really complex. And I don't want them to call a help desk, especially a lot of the help desks are in English, and then they have to wait for a translator. So no, you know, it's obvious that they call me, hoping that I can solve that issue for them.
So we focused a little bit on some of the challenges. How about we now take a little step into our hopes for the future? So we'll start with perhaps a simple question, and I'm going to ask you what some of those hopes are. What are those big things you hope will happen?
I had a trial where a lot of things were wrong, and I called up the project manager eventually, and being in a constructive way, said a lot of things that have happened right now was solved by the sites, but could have been prevented if we would be at the drawing table, both on technology part, on the protocol part, the laboratory manual, things like that. So 3 months later, he called me and said, like, we're now rolling out our big phase 3 trial. I want you there at the drawing table. And we have a physician from the US. So both of us were at this, this team meeting, Zoom meeting, whatever. And it was, I think, in the second or the third meeting, this American physician, also a female physician, said, you know what, I think I found my twin sister in the Netherlands. Everything she hated about the trial, everything that's not working, I hate it, and every solution that I bring up, she agrees with. Only to tell you, it is a global thing. It's not because I have issues at my site that I'm the only site. The majority of the sites will have it. The issue is that a lot of sites don't dare to speak up, and there are two reasons for that. The one who's really struggling is the coordinator, and the PI has no clue. That's why I want to be hands-on and know what their struggle is, because to me, they listen. There's not a lot of people in the industry that will listen to a coordinator. Or they say, like, yeah, you know, arrange this at your working place. This is not something for us. So that's why I think it's important for me to speak out and say that. Other reason is why some of the sites don't want to speak out is because they're afraid they're losing business, that a sponsor will not go back. And I've learned, and, you know, it's my vulnerability that I'm putting on the table, saying, like, listen, I think we can do better. Literally, I'm saying we. It's not like you can do better, we can do better. Let's help each other in this. And by doing that, I've learned over the years that people, you know, take up the opportunity to sit down with me and talk about it and look at, you know, what can we do to make this easier. And for that, you know, you can call me. I'm not saying day and night, but you can call me.
I'm just writing down day and night.
Depending on the time zone.
Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time, but that's also an amazing segue into something I'd like to. We've talked about some of the challenges, we've talked about some of the things that we want to fix, but how do we move from today to tomorrow to the day that follows? And what do you think we can all do, leaving this summit together, to bring those things into effect?
Yeah. So I would say keeping the conversation going is going to be the most important. We really are now seeing a lot of progress with a lot of our products here at Veeva that are solving this communication, information exchange problem that we have at the site and sponsor and from the site to the patient. I really think of the site as like the hub of where all the information exchange happens. You know, they're getting information from sponsors, maybe from sponsors, CRO's site. It's going to patients, it's coming back to the site, it's going back to the sponsor. So to me, that is the problem to solve in the industry, is like this flow of information across all of these disconnected systems. We have to simplify that, and we have to make it easier for the site, since they are the linchpin in all of this. And as we move forward and we have an opportunity now to make more connections in our technology to help with this information exchange problem, that gives me a lot of hope for the future. And I also know it's really complicated and it's going to take incremental steps, and we already know sometimes we're going to have to pivot, and we build something in a product and we could have done better, and so we go back. And I think it's going to be very iterative to move forward and really get this right for the industry in a way that works globally. But I think we can do it if we keep the communication going and we have everybody at the table, and we're committed to this iteration of really having a much better way to exchange information across all these stakeholders. So I'm super excited about continuing that.
Vivian, anything to add to that?
Everything you said, I agree with. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here and spending my time here. No, but it was something in the beginning that you said is like trials are being conducted at a site, and a lot of people don't take that as a conscious thing. Like that's where it's happening. I mean, there's sponsors, CROs, vendors, laboratory, all these things that are running around us, but it is the site who's conducting it. And literally, we hardly have any say. To put it in politely, it's shoved down our throat. And we have to deal with it, and we have to manage it, but we have to do it. And we have no say in it.
Okay, I want to add an example of it all happens at the site. If you get sick or a family member of yours gets sick, which is something that just recently happened to me, you can have contacts at that sponsor, which I did. And you can't get anything done for that patient if you don't know the site and you don't know how to get access through the site. The site is so key. And so having their voice at the table is something that I'm really passionate about too, because the site for me is everything right now to get to bring that care and potentially extend life. It's not, I can't, the sponsor cannot help me. So we need to keep that in mind.
I think there's two things I'd pick up on there. First of all, Peter Gassner said it in our opening presentation, in our keynote, research is happening at sites. It's not happening at sponsors, not happening in data management, it's happening in sites. I think that is a very important statement of intent. I also think this is very much about solving the Rubik's Cube, and you're describing that. You can't solve a problem for one person at the expense of everyone else, but sites and patients surely is. If there's one or two people who are more important, that's where it is, let's be honest. So with that, I want to be respectful of your time. I also want to think you sort of ran a fantastic segue for me into my favourite question, which I reserve for everyone. And I'm going to ask Vivian first, and then ask you, Bree. But in this scenario, I give you a magic wand. And if there's one thing you could just stop doing today and send it to room 101 to never rear its ugly face ever again, what would it be? And the opposite question, if there's something you can't do today that you could wave that wand and suddenly you could, what would they be?
Well, the first one is there is a tendency of ticking boxes when you're starting trial. Yes, you've done that. You've done the training, and nobody looks at the quality of the training or what it actually means. It's just a tick of boxes. All my boxes are ticks. Yes, now you can start. And that is not a sensible way of doing it. That's not how you evaluate a trial or evaluate a site to start a trial. So moving away from the tick box culture, but make sensible things like we talked about trainings. My training should not be the same as that one for a coordinator. Coordinator's much more hands-on, and mine should be like more in-depth, information on the protocol, for instance. That makes sense. If I could do something, and it's happening tomorrow, for all systems to communicate. And whether that's within the same industry, the same vendor or whatever, but it's just like one entry, you enter this and it's, it's
Write
there.
once, read many times. Simple to say, hard to achieve. I like both of your answers. Thank you very much. So Bree, how do you follow that?
Okay, so my follow would be that I would get rid of the fact that only a few physicians offer clinical trials. I think that should be something that is part of your option for care as a patient, with the physicians that you already trust, that are already taking care of you, and you don't have to go above and beyond to find those PIs, those resilient people like Vivian, and that we just simply make it easier to enfold it into our healthcare system. I'm a patient, and I am on my phone, my smartphone, and I am searching for a clinical trial. I'm Googling it. I find it. I get a number for someone that can actually screen me for the trial. I call the number. I get screened. That easy. That's what I want. For patients to be able to actually find trials in seconds and be able to see if they're eligible within a few minutes.
Can I just add one thing? The biggest challenge for physicians moving into clinical research, and that's why there's a lot of one and dones, as we call them in the industry, is that regular healthcare is totally different from conducting a clinical trial. And as a Dutch inspector once told me, he said, your job as a physician is far more challenging because you have the rigidity of the protocol where you have to stick to it, and you can't move 1 inch left or right because it will be seen as a deviation or an error or whatever, and there's like penalties attached to it. In regular healthcare, there are guidelines, and you can do whatever you want basically, but it's guidelines. And I think a lot of physicians that do want to move perhaps into clinical research need to be mentored. Like, this is a huge difference. And also having, in med school, teaching that's also an option in your career. But there's a lot of work that we as the industry have to do. But that is one of the biggest challenges, to find suitable people, realizing, and I think it's such a waste of time and money and effort. If there is a physician that thinks, I want to move into, does one trial, and that says, no way, I'm not doing another one. Because we did, you've gone over the first hurdle, and it's easier to continue to the ones, following them. Those are less, they're not that high.
I do need to say thank you to everyone who's joined, but really thank you to the two of you. I have a feeling we're touching the top of an iceberg. But future summits, I really hope I can rely on you to deliver, as in they will keep going. I feel like this is a conversation that's beginning, so not ending. But I want to thank you both.